Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Nick, and this is MSFS Flight Plans, a place where all we do is try to find the coolest, most interesting, best-looking places in the world to fly over, and then I tell you all about the stuff that we're seeing on the ground after I spend a day or two researching as much as I can jam into my brain in that time period, all just to give you one more reason to get up in the air again and again. We are back on my native turf in the Sunshine State, in a place that we might as well call a hometown flyover because of how much time I have spent in this city over the last 30 years, and that is the world's playground, Orlando, Florida. And I've been really hesitant to do this tour for a while because, and I'm only guessing here, anyone who's been simming for a while has surely flown over Orlando, especially the parks before. But then I remembered that this channel is not just about looking at things, but learning about things, and I thought it would be awfully selfish of someone who knew as much about this area as I did to not give you a personal tour. So that's what we're going to do, and I hope you enjoy it. As you can see, we are in the Blackwing, and I went through about 3 or 4 planes. This is a very, very performance-intensive area. We've got several add-ons installed. It's really detailed, so you'll need something that is pretty low on performance drag unless you want to turn all your settings way, way down. So I picked this plane, and hopefully it'll be a little bit better, and we still might get a little bit of stuttering, but it's not going to be too bad. And if you like this flight, as always, the link to bring it into little nav map will be included in the video description. Whoop, got to turn that down one notch. There we go. So you can just pull it into a little nav map and then drag it over into the sim if you like it. And if you do use this flight plan, it's going to start you at a parking spot a little bit back behind us. But it was kind of a twisty-turvy way to get over here, so I figured I'd get a little bit closer to the runway. So just be mindful of that. You'll probably need to pull up a little airport map to figure out how to get over this runway, but we're pretty close to it right now. I turned the live weather off because we had a cold front come through Florida this week, and it's been really windy out, and it was kind of overcast in Orlando. So this is what Florida looks like most of the time. This is just the few clouds setting, and I think I have the time of day set around noon. So when you see the video description, you'll notice that there are lots, probably about a dozen add-ons, all of them freeware, again, which is just great. And just put, if you want to add any add-ons, the ones that I've got included, because if you look in flightsim.to, there are lots and lots of add-ons for this area. If you just search for Orlando or Disney, well, just search for Orlando and you'll see it because that'll pull up everything in the area. But some of them didn't work, and some of the ones that did messed up the default scenery. So I've parsed it all out, and only the ones included on here are the ones that will add anything to this flight without ruining anything. And believe it or not, there was not any add-ons for Disney. The only one was for Cinderella's Castle, and that was 3 years old, as are most of them. And the comments said that it was really, really creating some frame rate issues, and we'll be able to tell what the castle is when we get out there, so I figured for just one little spot, I don't want to add any more issues to the performance problems that we'll probably be having anyway. So I left that out. Universal Studios had 2 add-ons. One of them didn't work at all. The other one made it look really jacked up, so I left both of those out. But there's a good one for SeaWorld. There's a Orlando City Pack in there, one for Kissimmee, and all the rest of the default scenery looks pretty good, so I don't think you'll be disappointed in anything we're going to see. The only add-ons for the airports that I've got included are for our destination airport, which is down at Kissimmee, and it wasn't a full mod for the airport. It just was an improvement mod, and I don't know the area well enough to see how much it did. So you can take that one or leave that one. Man, this plane is really grabby on the ground. Okay, let's see. We got our CDI set. Check the barrow. 1 notch of flaps. And once those get down, let's go ahead and turn our landing lights on, which are extremely bright in this plane. Let's go ahead and do it. So I did have the catalyst for doing this flight was some people, you know, since I'd mentioned maybe doing one at some point, there were some folks that asked to get the tour of the area. So again, if you've been simming for a while, I'm sure you've seen all this before. Probably won't be anything that's just going to blow your mind as far as things to look at, although there are going to be some improvements, especially with the local landmarks that you probably wouldn't know about unless you were getting a tour from me or someone who lived down here. All right, gears up. But everything's going to look pretty good anyway. And flaps up. And I've been having some issues hopping on the GPS guidance, so I'm going to get a little bit further out from the airport before we turn that on. And as you can see, default scenery looks good. Right by the airport here, if you look down under the tree canopies, you'll see some of those weird formations underneath them, but once we get up to our cruise altitude, which is going to be 2300 on this flight, everything should look pretty cool. Alright, autopilot on. Nav on. And we'll set the vertical speed. We don't need to be going up at 1,500 feet a minute. No, we'll go up at 500. All right. All right, looks like the GPS caught it that time. So this airport that we left from is Orlando Sanford, and it's Kilo Sierra Foxtrot Bravo, and it's one of the city's 2 big international airports, and this one's about 15 miles north of downtown. And about 5 miles to the south and closer to the parks is Orlando International. If you've flown domestically into Orlando in real life, that's probably the one that you came into. This one's a good ways north, and they don't have nearly the level of commercial traffic as that place does. And there's also 2 runways at the Orlando Executive Airport, which is directly east of downtown. So you could take off from that one if you really wanted to be close to downtown, but there's a few things I want to show you while we're up here. So we'll check these out before we go down there. So in just a second, we're going to fly over Interstate 4, known as I-4 locally, and it runs all the way through downtown Orlando, and if you take it up this way, it'll take you to Daytona. That's where it dead ends, right at I-95 in Daytona. So if you're coming from anywhere in Florida, unless you live right next to Orlando, you're probably going to take a portion of I-4. If you're coming from Tampa, which is where I-4 ends, then you would take that east. And Daytona's about 35 miles in that direction, and there's I-4 right there, winding its way out that way. And Tampa's about, I don't know, 75, 80 miles in that direction. And as you can see, as I've told you before on our other flights, Florida is a very flat place. And we have a lot of lakes around here, more so here than up around me in Jacksonville. And a lot of the smaller ones were formed by sinkholes where the earth just falls down to the aquifer through the limestone down there underneath it. And most of these are pretty shallow. That big one out there, this one's called Lake Apopka, which is the 4th largest lake in Florida, and it's right smack dab in the middle of the state. And although it's pretty big, it's only about 15 feet deep. But Florida itself has around 7,800 lakes, if you count anything bigger than an acre as a lake. And something that you'll only see in Florida, though I won't exclude the possibility that you might spot them in other parts of the world, are something that we call retention ponds around here. And in places like golf courses and residential developments, they try to make them a little bit more ornamental looking. But we'll probably see some others on this flight. Whenever they're going to build a big neighborhood or build a retail strip or a commercial area, they always have to plan for where the runoff is going to go. And if there aren't any natural lakes in the area, that's probably a retention pond right there. They'll have to dig out some ponds for the water to run into, because when they put the roads in here and the foundations for the houses and all the buildings, the ground underneath those can't soak up the water anymore, so they have to make these retention ponds. All these things here, you think that they're just there to be water hazards, but nope, they're there to soak up extra water. And you better believe there's some good fishing out here. In fact, the biggest bass I ever caught was at the retention pond right around the corner from my house, probably about a 10-pounder. Couldn't believe it. But as you can imagine, not many people are fishing in these things, so the fish get nice and big. And you can see down there, I mean, that scenery looks really good. The immersion factor on this is very, very high. I'm going to give it like a 9 out of 10. And I'm guessing that the map for the parks region was probably done sometime before 2017, because there's an area of Universal Studios where they started building something in 2017 that looks like they just broke ground for it in the sim, so that kind of gives you a date for when they probably took the pictures for the maps out here. I'm sure all that will be updated, I'm guessing, when 2024 comes out. But this looks good, really good. Okay, here's a local favorite for you that you only know about if you're from around here, or have me as your tour guide. And that's this little building sticking up right over here. I'm going to slow down just a little bit. We don't want to blow through that stuff too fast because I got a few things to show you. That thing is called the Majesty Building, but better known to locals as the I-4 eyesore. And that project was started by the CEO of an independent religious TV station in 2001, and the goal was to build the, at the time, $40 million structure without taking on any debt, funded purely by donations. And that went about as well as you could probably imagine. And as of the end of last year, over 20 years later, it still was not complete. In fact, I was just out here 2 weeks ago at a soccer tournament, and every time I drive by there, there's a parking garage down here next to it. I always look to see if there's any cars parked in there, which would mean that someone is inhabiting it, and there weren't. But it was on a Sunday, so as of the end of 2022, it was still not complete. And can you imagine, I mean, building codes and all that change over that time? I imagine that's going to wind up costing, if they ever finish it, way more than $40 million. So this town out here is called Altamont Springs, and there's the Altamont Mall, which looks like it actually has a little traffic. That's how you know this is a dated map, because who goes to indoor malls anymore, especially in Florida? And this area here around this big lake is called Crane's Roost Park, and they've got a big boardwalk that goes all the way around it, and you'll actually see a little portion of it crossing the water here and then back over here. Let's look at the eyesore real quick. This was an add-on, actually, so you know the guy that did that lives around here, because nobody that wasn't from around here would know anything about that. And there's a little parking garage I always look in. And it's just been sitting there. Look at that water tower. That's a rare treat. And this little thing right down here is a little floating stage. And on this side of it, they got an amphitheater so you can watch concerts and stuff out there, which is pretty cool. Look how flat this is, though. Not even a ripple anywhere. Not until you get up around Tallahassee in the northernmost parts of the state where you get any kind of hills at all. But even those are very, very gentle rolling hills. And what's crazy about this area, especially down by the parks, you know, obviously it's really built up around here, but you go a mile or two out in any direction away from the main tourist attractions, and it's just cow pastures. It's crazy. Take a wrong turn trying to find your resort, forget about it. You'll be in cow pastures. But just follow the traffic and that'll get you back to where you're trying to go. Alright, this next little thing sticking up right here, believe it or not, that's also an add-on, and that's called the Channel 2 News Tower. Also a local landmark for anyone from around here. And if we're lucky, we'll see some of the little satellite dishes out here, and they even have a little helicopter pad. I think that's it right there. But anyone who's ever traveled through here knows this place, because this is usually where the bumper-to-bumper traffic starts, which will stretch all the way down I-4, and it'll just be stop and go for about an hour and a half on a good day until you get past the parks. Insane traffic. Doesn't matter when you come, what time of year, what day of the week. Maybe in the middle of the night it'd be a little bit better. Yeah, there's our helicopter pad. And right down here, there's all their little satellite dishes. You can just barely see them out in front there. But look at that detailing. And I've got my object level of detail turned down pretty low too, along with my terrain level of detail, which is why it looks a little bit vacant as you get further out there. Alright, we're going to take a few turns here as we get set up for a flyby of downtown. I'm going to pull the throttle back even a little bit more. I'm going to try to get to about 120. I think that'll be a good speed for us. So I'll take this opportunity to give you some of the history of Orlando. For one thing, no one is really sure how this place got its name, but being inhabited by the archetypical Florida man for about 100 years before it was called Orlando, folk stories abound, none of which we'll have time to ponder today because we got too much other stuff to talk about. Look how detailed that is. Fantastic. And you can see they got athletic fields everywhere out here. Some were just for the locals, some obviously for high schools. But a lot of them are destinations for people who come from all over the country to do Little League tournaments out here. We'll see a really big complex down by Disney. But all this land was originally home of the Seminole Indians, and its first recorded name was Fort Gatlin, which appeared in 1838. And that was an actual fort, which you can't see anymore. And that was built up to defend against Seminole attacks. Go Noles. Those tennis courts down there. Probably pickleball courts these days. They're turning all the tennis courts into pickleball courts around here. Look at the detail in this place right here. Look at that. Beautiful. But after the Seminole attacks settled down, people started referring to this area as Jernigan, which was the surname of some redneck cattle ranchers who moved down here from Georgia, setting the genetic precedent for some of the finest specimens of absurd behavior to ever grace the planet. And for reasons about which we can only speculate, they changed the name to Orlando in 1885. And here's another tidbit for you. Considering this is probably the most gilded region of the world, in a stroke of PR brilliance, they decided to change the name of this area from Mosquito County to Orange County in 1845. Talk about smart marketing. Alright, there's the Orlando Executive Airport right there. And that opened in 1928, and it was the first commercial field in Central Florida. But the military also took that one over during World War II and renamed it the Orlando Army Air Base, and they used it for anti-submarine missions, and after the war they repurposed it for civilian use again. And the main airport, which just went out of view over there, which is right over here, that's Orlando International, just a few miles to the south. And we won't get a real good look at that one. But that was also a military base when they first opened it in 1940, and they called it Fort McCoy. We're going to get one hard freeze right here, and that should be the end of it. It's happened on every flight so far. And here's a little bit of interesting aviation trivia for you. The reason why that airport code is KMCO is because it was originally Fort McCoy. Alright, so here's downtown, and this is called Lake Eola out here, and they got a bunch of swan paddle boats and a little fountain thing here, and this little thing you can barely see is called the Walt Disney World Amphitheatre, which of course they have concerts and stuff like that in. And here's the Amway Center where the Orlando Magic plays nowadays, and there's a big stadium here now that there were add-ons for it, but none of them did anything. So right down here now there's a big, I think it's a soccer stadium. And this should be where the Citrus Bowl is, which is called the Camping World Stadium. And it looks nothing like that. There was add-ons for that too, but no matter what I put in here, it still looked like that. It looks like it's under construction or something here because the sides of it are missing. But that's where it is. I don't know why it turned out like that when everything else down here looks so good, but it is what it is. But that looks good, doesn't it? And there's I-4 running through there. Can you imagine how congested the traffic gets down there? Well, I can tell you from experience, it's really, really bad. And here's some of the sports fields out here. And this one actually belongs to this high school, which I think is Jones High School, right here. But it looks beautiful, as all sports fields usually do. And for some reason, Orlando is rated the worst city to live in the state of Florida. And I haven't spent any time living down here. I have some friends who live down here, and they didn't say they enjoyed it all that much, but I think they may have some crime issues downtown, and of course the traffic is just horrendous. Not like Atlanta traffic, but it's pretty bad. Pretty bad out here. Alright, can we see the other big airport? Is that it over there? Maybe it's back that way. We're not going to come back on that side of it. So here's I-4 still snaking its way through town here. If you were driving on it, you would be probably using some foul language. Alright, this place up here is one of the only theme parks out here that I never went to in all the time that I was coming out here, and that was called the Holy Land Experience. And it's not as bad and boring as it probably sounds. I mean, who would go to a Bible theme park? It was kind of more like a museum mixed with a theme park. But that never really took off, so... And they had some, like, old scrolls and stuff. They have something called the Scriptorium in there, which had a bunch of old Bibles and all that. But, I mean, come on. It's like talking to your kids. What do you want to do? Go to Space Mountain or go to the Scriptorium, kids? Yeah, I think Space Mountain's probably going to win out on that. But that's one that you can see when you're driving down I-4 there. And they closed that one down a couple years ago. TBN, Trinity Broadcast Network, wanted to turn it into a recording studio for a while. And for some Christian movies, that didn't go over very well. So they just wound up shutting it down. Alright, here comes Universal up here, and so I'm just going to kind of tell you the big landmarks for what we're going to see. We're not going to have time to get into a lot of detail. So when you come down here, and you can see this one from the interstate when you're coming by, these are the big visitor parking areas right here. They got a big Hard Rock Cafe out here, and this is the employee parking over in this region. And then down here they have something called the City Walk, which you don't need to pay to get into, but is a great place to hang out if you like getting wasted. I used to do that back when I liked getting wasted. I haven't done that in a long, long time, but they got all kinds of bars and restaurants down there. And then over here is Universal Studios proper, which is a, you know, ride the movies kind of theme park. And very cool. And then over here is a place called Islands of Adventure, and this is where all the roller coasters are. And I always have to be very careful when I go there and select the ones that will give me an immediate migraine later in the trip. And then over here is where they built Volcano Bay. And they started that, and they opened it in 2017, so that's why I know that's about when this map was created. That's where that is now. And when you come along the side of it here, if you're driving through, they got a huge volcano with like steam coming out of the top of it, you can see. So that's pretty cool. And this is called Dr. Phillips High School right here. Pretty big complex. And there's a retention pond. There's a retention pond. That's what most of them look like around us. Big rectangles. And last time I went to Universal, which was earlier this summer, we were there for about 10 hours, and I rode 4 rides. The wait time for the lines are just insane. Just insane. So I'll give you some helpful hints for avoiding that if you're planning on taking a trip out here in real life. And out here they're building something called Epic Universe, which is going to be another Universal place, and they said that's going to be even bigger than what they have on the other side of the road here. And I think that's going to open in 2025. It got held up because of COVID. And this is a Lockheed Martin plant here. I'm not sure what they make there, but probably nothing that flies because there's no runways around there. And then running down through here is International Drive, which if you want to get something to eat that's just a little cheaper than the theme parks, they have all kinds of cool restaurants and shops out here. And even though it didn't render in the sim, they got a huge Ferris wheel out here called the Orlando Wheel. And every time I've ever been there, we were the only people there. They got an aquarium down there too, and for some reason that didn't render properly. But again, it's like, do I want to ride roller coasters or a huge Ferris wheel? I imagine that place will probably go under at some point. This is the big Orange County Convention Center. Both sides of this are the Orange County Convention Center. All these huge buildings are hotels where you can come and stay. As you can imagine, tourism is the backbone of this town. And up here we're going to see SeaWorld. And it is a pretty good-sized complex. So this is the main SeaWorld area out here. And then over here is a water park called Aquatica, which I've not yet been to. I've been to some of the water parks out here, but not that one. And they used to have a big Wet n Wild out here. They shut that thing down once all the theme parks started adding their own water parks, because these, of course, are much cooler than a Wet n Wild. But SeaWorld is a great place to go. They've got some, it's not just sea animals to look at, but they've got some great roller coasters and stuff out here. This thing sticking up in the air is a big tower that goes up in the air, but because going up in towers is so boring compared to roller coasters, I've never done that. And this is the big Shamu arena right here, so if you wanted to go see Shamu, and I don't know, they had a little bad publicity several years ago when one of the whales killed somebody. So the last time I went out there, they didn't have the huge male orcas out there. They just had the smaller ones. I don't even know if they still had any. And if you've never seen one of those things up close, that is quite a sight. They're much bigger than I thought they would be. But when I went out last time, they didn't let any of the males out. It was kind of depressing to see something that big stuck in that little, well, it was a huge pool, but a big animal stuck in a relatively small pool for its size. And these big things out here are hotels, and there's actually a water strip out here that you can designate in Little Nav Map and in the sim. And this one's a Ritz-Carlton, and this is a big Marriott, I think, right out here. And these things here are probably timeshares. We're not at any of the park resorts yet. Anything that looks like that is probably a timeshare. And all these little neighborhoods out here. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. If I lived out here, it would probably be real awful, because to get anywhere would just take forever. Because, of course, all the tourists are going to your grocery store right next to your house, and just... you wait for everything out here. Alright, we've got to get ourselves turned around here to get the best viewing angle for all the Disney attractions. So as we do that, I'll tell you about my history with this place. If you've watched some of our earlier flights, you might recall that my family moved down to Central Florida from New England in the early 90s when I was just entering high school. And we lived on the Gulf Coast about 90 minutes from Orlando. And if you want to see that town, check out our Deep South tour, which is a really cool flight. And we were about equidistant from Orlando and Tampa, so we would come out here a lot. A lot. And even though Disney World and Epcot had already been here for decades, this area was not nearly as jam-packed with tourists as it is today. In fact, they were so desperate for revenue in the 90s that they would offer annual passes to Florida residents to get people down here during the slower months. I apologize for that freezing, guys, but that's about as good as it's going to get unless I start turning the graphics down so low that it interrupts our resolution down there. I'm sure you'll probably experience the same thing when you're flying out here, but it's not too bad. And I'm guessing those Florida resident passes were pretty cheap because my family was far from wealthy back then, so we'd drive out here several times a year and stay at the same resort called Dixie Landing back then, but they've since changed that to Port Orleans. And I would guess I've probably been to Disney 40 or 50 times since we moved down here. Although I've not been back since COVID, so if any of my narration seems a little bit out of date, that's why. I have been to Universal, as I mentioned before, and SeaWorld more recently, however. And I know it probably seems like an obnoxious statement considering how many people around the world would probably give their right arm to visit this place. I've been to Disney so many times that I would be perfectly content to never set foot down there again. So to say I know the whole park like the back of my hand would be an understatement. But if you're planning your first trip to the parks, you're welcome in advance for everything I'm about to tell you. Alright, so the first thing we'll see down here on our left is Downtown Disney. One of only two portions of any park that you can see from the interstate, the other being Volcano Bay, which we just flew over up there by Universal. And there's no cost to enter this area either, which is mostly just shops and restaurants and some bars, all of which are very good and very expensive. And this is going to be it right up here. And this is where Pleasure Island used to be back in the day. I'm sure you probably heard about that place, which was a lot of fun. Again, if you like getting wasted, they'd have a big New Year's Eve countdown every night and party accordingly. But they shut that down years ago and started the much more profitable venture of leasing the space out to private venues like the House of Blues, which is down there now, which is cool, but not like Pleasure Island used to be. And when you drive by from the interstate, sometimes you can see they've got one of those, I don't know, helium-filled balloons that you can crawl in, and they attach it to a rope, and it goes up in the air, and they pull it back down, up in the air, and pull it back down. And they've also got a Cirque du Soleil place down here, which is what this is, right over here. So if you're into that type of thing, it's worth checking out, and it's free. Every time we go down here, there's a big Godiva chocolate place that my wife loves to go to when we're down there. And of course, they got hotels all around it here. And there's Epcot, which we'll get a much better look at when we come back around. So the place we used to stay, Dixie Landing, which is now Port Orleans, was this place here. And you could actually take a little boat that would go down this little canal here and go back to downtown Disney. And so me and my buddies would go do that at night once my parents hit the sack. Very cool. And the one a little bit closer to downtown Disney is a newer one that they may have refurbished that one. It's called Old Key West. Each of these resorts has kind of got a theme to it. And what flight would be complete without at least one fort, right? Well, I found one for us, and that's going to be in this area right up here. And that is the Fort Wilderness Resort. And that was one of the first ones. They opened that one in 1971. And they've got lots of room for tents and RVs and a whole bunch of cabins. So it's a glamping fan's dream world down there. And just for kicks, I checked out a price of their most basic campsite options. And I had to go out to next summer to find one that was available. And really, you can't see it. It's kind of covered by trees out here, but it's all this area right here. 114 bucks a night for just a spot to put your tent up, which is actually probably way cheaper than any of the other Disney resorts. And if you like a little less mosquito with your wilderness, right up here is the Fort Wilderness Lodge, which is a little bit more like a traditional hotel. And this thing here is called Discovery Island, which used to be a nature attraction from 1974 to 99. And if you go there today, which you might be able to paddle out to, you'll find it filled with a bunch of abandoned buildings, which would be pretty neat to check out. You can see pictures of it online if you want to. And this is called the Contemporary Resort, which is one of their deluxe priced places to stay, and it's right next to the Magic Kingdom, which is right here. And the thing I like about this one is the monorail runs right through the middle of it, which is pretty cool. So if you're coming to Disney, you can get here, parking's over here for the Magic Kingdom, and you can either take the monorail or take a little boat that'll go from here to here. And if you haven't done it before, I strongly recommend you take the monorail. It's worth the wait in the line to get on that because it's a lot faster usually than the boat. So here is the notorious, infamous, and renowned Space Mountain right here. So this is called, is it Tomorrowland or Futureland? They got it broken into different lands. This is called Fantasyland out here. There's where It's a Small World is, the worst ride ever made, but for some reason everybody loves it. And then out here is Frontierland, where they have things like Big Thunder Mountain, and what used to be my favorite called Splash Mountain, which was a Brer Rabbit ride. But Brer Rabbit's got a little bit of racist baggage on it, so they're now converting that to a Moana ride. And we're going to turn here in just a little bit and we'll get a better look at the other side of everything. And if you're really into roller coasters, you'll probably be disappointed by everything at any of the Disney parks because none of them are that great. But what Disney does do great is just the scenery with everything is just really cool. And let's see, there's the castle right there. So you can see why I didn't put the add-on in. You can tell it's the castle. And this is called Main Street USA. You'll come in the gates right here, walk on up here. They got little shops and stuff. They have their big parade every night. There's where Splash Mountain used to be. And this is probably one of the nicer resorts they got out here. This is called the Grand Floridian. And a dark bit of history about that place. In 2016, there was a family visiting out here from Nebraska. And the little 2-year-old son was playing down on this beach down here. And a gator came up and grabbed him and dragged him in the water and killed him in front of the parents and a bunch of guests and everything. Just terrible. And this is the Polynesian resort out here. And this was one of the first places they had out here. It was the first resorts they had. The Polynesian. And that's still there today. And they used to have a big racetrack out here that never got much traction. You can see they pulled it up now, but they did put a nice retention pond that looks like Mickey Mouse in there, so that's cool. And they had, after they realized they couldn't get anyone to come race out here, they turned it into one of those Richard Petty driving experience things, where they zip you around the track really, really fast, but they've even shut that down and completely pulled the track out. And what's always so funny is after a day at the Magic Kingdom, you can see all the people walking with what I call the cowboy walk, with their legs spread apart after this 90-degree weather, 100% humidity. Everyone's thighs are all chafed up and they're walking straddle style out to their cars, usually miserable, yelling at their kids and their spouse. Not something I want to do again at this point. And running all the way from, so this is Epcot over here, running from Epcot to the Magic Kingdom right along the main thoroughfare to get into the parks, right along the side here is the monorail track. And just to give you an idea of how vacant this thing used to be back in the 90s during the slow months, we would get on the monorail sometimes, me and my buddies, and we'd be the only people on it. And so we would pull our pants down and smash our butt cheeks up against the window, wave to all the kids and their families driving into Disney World. Welcome to Orlando. We would be the only people on the monorail. You would never see anything like that these days. All right, we're going to come up on Blizzard Bay here in just a little bit, which is one of the big water parks they've got out here. Where is that place? Did we already cruise over it? I don't think so, not yet. Here it is, right here. And that's the only of the Disney water parks I've been to, and it is a heck of a lot of fun. They've actually closed that for refurbishing, but I think they're opening it back up again next week, as a matter of fact. But it's neat. A lot more thrilling than any of the roller coasters in Disney World. If you like losing your stomach, the only one that used to do it was Splash Mountain, which is why I liked it so much. All the others are pretty tame. I mean, they jerk you around the corners pretty quick, but nothing like you'll get at Islands of Adventure or SeaWorld. They got some great coasters out there, too. All right, so here are some of the value-priced resorts they've got out here at Disney. And the one that we used to go and stay at when we weren't at Dixie Landing after they shut that down, this one's called the All-Star Resort here. And what makes that value is that they don't have like the big cafeteria with the buffet and all that stuff in there. It's more like a traditional hotel, but being that it's Disney, it is themed appropriately. And then here is the ESPN Wild World of Sports complex out here. And this is where all the little leaguers come and do all their tournaments and stuff. And every now and then they'll actually have some professionals go out there and do some promotional stuff. But that's pretty neat. I've gone to watch a few games down there, been to a few tournaments out there. And if you're wondering what Disney and ESPN have to do with each other, well, Disney bought ESPN back in the mid-90s when they bought ABC, which I guess those guys are affiliated. And incidentally, I've been to the ESPN headquarters. That's up in Connecticut when I lived up there. But look at this park. Look how well detailed that is. Big baseball field there. Fantastic. And we're flying right over the spot where they've recently built another water park that's not affiliated with Disney. It's called like H2O World or something like that. But it's so new that you can't see it in the sim. And Hollywood Studios, if I forget to mention it before, I wanted to mention it as we were coming around that first time, but we kind of went over too fast. Hollywood Studios is to the southwest of Epcot. Once we get back over there, we're going to circle around closer to Epcot here in just a second. And this is called the Gaylord Resort here. I've stayed there a couple times at business conventions. That place is pretty impressive too, but again, it's big, but nothing like Disney as far as the spectacle of it all. It's got a big thing that looks kind of like a circus tent going up on the top of it here, and inside here is just this giant like garden pavilion indoors. It's pretty wild. And as we come back around, we'll see Disney's other water park, which is called Typhoon Lagoon, and that one's much older than Blizzard Water Park, and that was opened in 1989. And I have to confess, I've never been to Typhoon Lagoon, despite it being the second most visited water park in the world, right before Blizzard Beach and right after one in, where do you think the most visited in the world is? Yep, China. There's the Gaylord. Funny name, fancy place. It's crazy because if you've ever been to the Magic Kingdom or Epcot looks a little bigger, but when I first flew over it, I was like, wow, that looks a lot smaller when you see it from the air than it feels when you're walking around down there. Alright, so Typhoon Lagoon, I think, is going to be right in here. We'll see if we can spot a bunch of water. That should be where it is. But look at how much land Disney has out here. All of this stuff belongs to Disney. Alright, can we see any water down there in Typhoon Lagoon? That's probably where their wave pool is, but it looks like it's empty, doesn't it? There's a little water slide coming down there. I don't know, I always just feel weird walking around half naked in front of total strangers, but maybe it's just me. My kids seem to love these places, so I usually just find a shady spot because I burn very easily and just avoid the crowds to whatever extent I possibly can. And when you get down there, you got to like rent a locker and all this stuff, and then, you know, you can never get one anywhere close to where you're trying to sit, so the hassle factor is high. But I try to bear in mind what it was like the first time I went to Disney. I don't want to pee on anyone's parade, because it probably is exciting if you've never been there before. Okay, so here's Epcot. This was opened in 1982, so about 10 years after Disney opened, 12 years maybe. And here's a bit of trivia for you. If you're a Disney fan, you probably already know it, but EPCOT is an acronym for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. And what I love about Epcot is that they've only modified a few parts of the park in the last few decades, so most of it's like touring a 1980s vision of what today would look like. And inside of here, they've kept the original ride. Inside that ball, they have something called Spaceship Earth, which is truly just It's like if you went to 1975 and tried to imagine what the year 2000 would look like. They got all the animatrons and everything in there. It's really dark, and they take you through, you know, man growing up through the Stone Age all the way to what they imagine the future would look like. You know, flying cars and all that kind of stuff. But I always like writing that for some reason because it's just so old school. And there's Hollywood Studios out there. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. I got a funny story about that. So out here, there's something called the World Showcase. I'm around this big lake out here. And as you go around it, they have, each of these is a different country representation. So they have like Italy, China, Morocco, the UK, France. But there's no rides or anything out there. And I never found it all that interesting because unless you like drinking a different beer from all the different parts of the world, which I guess some people really do, there's just not all that much to do when you go out there. In what used to be Norway, but they've converted it to a Elsa ride, there was this thing called the Maelstrom. And I don't know if there's a ride at all in there anymore. But that was pretty cool because it did drop your stomach a little bit. So at Hollywood Studios, which used to be called MGM, they have this ride called the Tower of Terror, which is what really put that place on the map. Nobody would really go out there before that. And the Tower of Terror is one of those deals where they take you kind of through a haunted house. You ride in this little car, you go up in the haunted house, and then you get to the very top of it, and it pushes you outside of it at the top, and then you just drop like straight down, which is awesome. And the last time I went there to work on it, last time I went there to ride it, they were working on it, and they had scaffolding all up the sides of it, so we got all the way up to the top, and it's like pitch dark, and then they open it up so you can look outside. And there was just a little guy out there adding stucco to the outside of it, like sitting right in front of it, like on the scaffolding, and he just kind of waved to everyone, and then away we went. Pretty funny to see that. So if I was going to rank Epcot on the must-see scale, I would probably put that with Hollywood Studios. I would spend my time at Magic Kingdom, Universal Studios, and SeaWorld if I was coming out here and had just a few days to see everything. And there's some more complexes. And out here, we're flying over right now Animal Kingdom, Disney's Animal Kingdom, which you can't see all that much of because it's really tree-covered. And I would also put that on my must-see list. They have what I think is the best ride in all of Disney. See, there's Blizzard Beach out there again. You know what? That's not Blizzard Beach. That's a new water park. How did that make it in the sim, but they didn't get the rest of Universal Studios? That's crazy. Huh. Well, there it is. But they've got a ride called Everest, the Everest Adventure or something like that, in Animal Kingdom. A great, great roller coaster. Not like the stuff you'll get at Islands of Adventure at Universal, but it is good for Disney standards. And then they've got another ride, an Avatar ride, which is one of those like 4D experiences where you get on like a little dragon and it lifts you out over this huge, like almost like an IMAX screen. And they spray water in your face and blow wind in your face. And it is hands down the best ride in Disney I've ever been on. Very, very cool. And the only one of those types of rides I've ever been on that didn't make me sick to my stomach. Really great. And they did an even better job with a waiting area, which is something that Disney has just absolutely nailed. They've somehow hacked the human brain so that you don't feel like killing everyone standing around you while you're waiting on rides. You always feel like you're making progress. They wind you through all types of passages, bring you inside, bring you back outside. We waited about 2 hours for that thing, but it was worth it. All right. We need to start coming down now. So let's come down to 1500. I'm going to just adjust it on here because my external thing's not working properly. And we'll bring our vertical speed down. Come down about, and we'll start slowing down. We're going to fly over a little town right up here called Celebration, and that was a town that was planned out by Disney. And I had some friends that lived out there for a while, and it is cool. I mean, imagine Disney building your neighborhood. It's really wild. Right down to the manhole covers, the way the streets are set up, the parks, all little storefronts, everything is just totally Disney. Very, very cool. And it won some kind of award in 2001, like the best neighborhood in the world to live in. I don't know what it looks like these days because I haven't been out there in quite a while. There's the ESPN thing again. But it's a pretty cool place. So the airport we're coming into is called Kissimmee Gateway, Kilo India Sierra Mike. And if you couldn't guess, this is the town of Kissimmee out in front of us. And like all the others, this one was once a military base known as Kissimmee Army Airfield when it was built in 1940 for the purpose of tactical flight training. And if you might be thinking this would be a cool place to be stationed, well, you can stop thinking that. There's another giant hotel there. Actually, that's a timeshare. I know exactly where that is because I've stayed there before. Before Disney came out here and they subsequently started building everything else up, this whole area was nothing but a hot, humid, swampy, Mosquito-ridden hellhole. Nobody wanted to be out here for any reason. In fact, the only reason Walt decided to come out here was because he could get all the land for so cheap. And while we've got a few minutes, just so you don't feel like such a stranger when you take your next trip to the happiest place on Earth, I'll give you a quick lesson on how to speak Floridian. If you've seen any of our other Sunshine State tours, you may have noticed we've got some very strange place names out here, most of which have Native American origins. Well, when I first moved down here from Connecticut, I was not yet fluent in Floridian and was often humiliated by the locals for butchering all the town names. So to save you from the same misfortune, I'll tell you the only rule you need to remember to get it right most of the time. The emphasis always goes on the second to last syllable. So for instance, it's not Kissimmee, which is how I said it before I knew any better. It's Kissimmee. And I'll tell you a few other examples, some of which I've mentioned in our other flights. We've got Withlacoochee, Steenhatchee, Weeki-Wachee, Homosassa, Sala Apopka. Get it? So when you're seeing these names, just remember, emphasis on the second to last syllable and you'll probably be okay. You won't get any strange looks from anybody. And one last little freebie I'll offer to anyone who's thinking about coming to any of the parks is make sure you upgrade your tickets to fast passes. That will allow you to set specific times for each ride. And if you get there within your window, it will allow you to skip the entire line for the ride. And it's a little pricey and requires a good bit of strategy to set it all up, but if you don't do it, you're going to have a lot of visitor remorse when you realize you just spent $150 a pop to stand in line all day and only hit a handful of rides, which is exactly what will happen to you if you don't do the fast pass. And if you don't want to spend any money on your lodging, here's another tidbit for you. Set aside a couple hours one day to get one of the spiels from the timeshare places. They'll usually give you a couple days for free if you do that, and if you line them up together, you can just pop from one to the other. I've done that many, many times. But don't ever buy one, for crying out loud. That would almost be as much of a waste of money as going to Hollywood Studios. Alright, so there's our airport. We're going to take a hard turn here in just a minute, and then we'll come on down, and then we'll check out a little nav map, a satellite image, so I can show you some of the stuff that we zipped over. See what I'm talking about? These cow pastures out here? You just get a little outside of town, and this is what everything looks like. I'm sure in 10 more years it will have spread all the way out here too. Yeah, but I probably stayed in, I don't know, a dozen timeshares out here, and some of the timeshares even have pretty nice amenities. I mean, some of them have water parks for the kids. One of them we went to had a big pirate ship water park. It was awesome. In fact, we came down here one time and just stayed at the timeshare the whole time. Didn't even hit any of the parks. Alright, I'm going to need to come down even a little bit more, but we'll just go ahead and slow way down. We'll go ahead and get the flaps out here and get our gear down. So that was Disney. If we really wanted to drag it out, we could have spent even more time down there, and I could have told you some more about that stuff, but we don't want to have a 2-hour-long flight. That's the gist of it. Retention pond, retention pond. Lots of retention ponds out here in these neighborhoods. So our runway is actually going to be back that way a little bit. We're going to take a hard left turn here in just a second. Let's give it a little bit of throttle. All in all, not complaining about living in Florida. If you can just get used to the heat and humidity most of the year, wonderful place to live, and being this close to something with so many attractions, all your relatives want to come visit you. You don't have to go visit them. But I would talk to someone, if you have not been to the theme parks before, talk to someone who knows a lot about it, because you can make it a much better experience if you can get some pointers before you go in there. Because if you just try to show up, buy your ticket, and go in, you are probably going to be very disappointed with the experience. Wasn't always like that, but it definitely is these days. The crowds are just way, way too intense. So, first place I'd go to, SeaWorld. If you really like thrill rides, Islands of Adventure at Universal, that's where you're going to find that stuff. Although, man, those coasters at SeaWorld, they got some really good ones out there. And if you haven't been to the Magic Kingdom and you just want to say you did it, go check that out. And again, if your time is limited, I'd probably skip Epcot. If you're going to Universal, you'll get the whole movie experience at that place, so you don't need to go to Hollywood Studios. I'd probably skip that one altogether. And definitely Animal Kingdom if you can find the time to do it. That place is really cool. And they have a big safari tour where everybody piles onto a big bus after waiting for 2 hours, and it drives through something that looks like a big, like, savanna land. And all the animals are just kind of free range out there, and they take you through there on the little cart. It's pretty cool. Kind of like a big immersive zoo. And if you can avoid it, I don't know what kind of food they let you bring into the parks these days. But bring some waters, because everything in there is just insanely expensive, as you can probably imagine. But that'll help make it a little better. And throw a bunch of talcum powder in your crotch. You don't want to do the cowboy walk back to your car, because once you get that chafe going, you're not going to want to go anywhere the next day. And for some reason, I guess it was just the kids' school schedules, we always wound up coming out here in the summertime when it was just brutally hot. And something I forgot to mention while I'm thinking about it, they still have some of the original attractions at Disney World, which I just have a soft spot for those from when it was originally opened back in the very early 70s. So they've got things like, I just call them the teacups, but I think it's called the Mad Hatter ride, which I never go on because I don't like stuff that spins around. Of course, the Haunted Mansion's out there. That's very cool. Space Mountain was not one of the originals. Neither was Big Thunder Mountain. And Space Mountain's just okay. That's another one that everyone wants to go on just because they want to say they did it. But if you've ever been to like a pop-up amusement park, you know, the one that sets up shop in the mall parking lot in the fall, that's about the caliber of the roller coaster that's inside that thing. But it's completely dark in there, which I think is kind of the draw. But as far as thrilling, I never thought it was that great. And you will wait forever to get on that thing. They just built one called the Seven Dwarfs Mine Ride, which is just okay. Big Thunder Mountain's just okay. And they got rid of Splash Mountain, so maybe the Moana one will be of that caliber. But, I mean, in the Magic Kingdom is where you get that full-on immersive Disney experience. And if you're really, really lucky, you might get to stay. They've got one hotel room in the top of Cinderella's castle, and you can't reserve it. You can't pay any amount of money for it. They only give it to people that win contests. Well, what the heck is that? Look at that thing. Maybe it's a new attraction they got going out there. The world's largest megaphone. What in the world could that be? Well, we're not going to fly over there and check it out. I have never noticed that before. But the most expensive and the biggest rooms, if money is no object, I think is at the Grand Floridian. Just don't go anywhere near the water. And I had to look up the frequency of gator attacks. Everyone that's not from Florida just assumes everyone's getting eaten by alligators and blown away by hurricanes out here. But they said about 10 people a year in Florida, in all of Florida, are eaten by alligators. So it's not all that infrequent. But we hear stories about people's pets getting eaten all the time, even in the residential areas. Those trees are awfully flat, aren't they? That doesn't look very good. Maybe that was part of the modification pack for this airport. Flatten the trees out, improve our frame rate. Alright, I think I'll hit that, hopefully hit that second taxiway, and we can pull on over and check out Little Nav Map. Look at just things like this. I love these little touches. This guy's got some junk out in his yard. Probably one of those junkyard monsters out there. Would be perfectly at home out here. And yeah, they do have some static aircraft out here, which I don't have any static aircraft turned on, so that was probably part of that add-on. Alright, let's get her set on down, then we'll pull on over and check out Little Nav Map. Let's see what they got parked over there. I can't tell from here. Someone had asked me recently what my top 3 favorite planes are, which I'd never really considered. No one had ever asked me that before, so I did consider it. In case any of you guys are curious, probably my number 1 is that DC-6 by PMDG. And I like all the jetliners. Of course, those just don't work for what we're doing out here, because I like the stuff that's really complex. And then probably the Twin Otter, which never works right anymore, unfortunately. And then probably the Chancellor. I love flying that thing. I don't know why. I just really, really like it. But for sightseeing, what we're doing out here, this plane and probably the Sting S4 are some of my favorites. Let's just go park out there amongst those planes. Looks like that's where we're supposed to be. Pop the hood and let everybody take a look at our engine. Boy, they put a lot of planes out here. It didn't seem to mess with our frame rate at all. It was much worse over downtown in the parks. Alright, let's see. Where are we going to go? We'll pull up in front of that hangar over there. And man, they just had a huge drop of new planes. I think they had 3 or 4 just in the last couple days. saw John Beckett was already reviewing some of them. And we'll have to check some of those out. They got a new turboprop that came out. That guy's missing some tires, isn't he? All right. Let's just shut her down. Ooh, boy. This is one of those planes where you're supposed to switch the fuel, too. I wasn't keeping an eye on that, but it looks like we're okay. All right. Let's pull over a little nav map. Okay. So if you don't know where Orlando is, it is right in the middle of the state. Right there. There's where our Space Coast Fly was. And here's where my hometown was up here. That's where we did that tour. Of course, where I live now is Jacksonville, which is way up here. So if you're coming down here, you just take I-95 all the way down here, past Daytona. You hook up with Daytona here, and you can actually just barely see I-4 coming down there. And then it runs all the way down here to Tampa. And there's Lake Apopka. And you can see there's no shortage of airports anywhere out here. And there was an add-on that you could get that put one right in the middle of Disney. That may be it. Yeah, it's like a micro strip. There was an add-on. Nope, that's a water one. So there's a solid landing strip you can get somewhere down here for Disney. Not sure where exactly that is, but it's available under the Orlando section in flightsim.to. All right. So here's where we took off from. A little bit of a ways up north here. Gosh, where is it? There it is. So that's our Orlando Sanford. There's I-4 there. And then we came down here, and here's the I-4 eyesore. Right there. There it is. And you can see it's still under construction, like usual. And here's Crane's Roost. There's that little floating stage they've got. So the amphitheater's out here. And then this little thing here going all the way around is their boardwalk. This was part of the add-ons. There's the Altamont Mall right there. This is all Altamont Springs out here. I think that's a big hotel right there. Then we came down to the city. Oh, and here's the Channel 2 news tower. And there's their satellite dishes out there. So if you're coming this way from Jacksonville, that's where the traffic starts. Geez, that traffic doesn't look nearly as bad as it usually is. That doesn't look realistic at all. And then we came to downtown Orlando out here. We had to get turned around a little bit. So here's the executive airport, which if you don't feel like checking out the I-4 eyesore, you might just want to start from down here. Came over downtown. Here's Lake Eola, and there's a little fountain thing they got out there. There's the Walt Disney World Amphitheatre, and that might even be a swan paddle boat right there because they got some of those out there. And then here's the stadiums. So here's the Amway Center. That looked just like it should. And then here's the Exploria Stadium, which was just a big field. There was nothing around it. And I don't think that thing is all that new, so I don't know why it looked like that. And obviously the Camping World Stadium looked nothing like that. These two ends of it were completely missing. So not sure what was going on with that. And then here's the Holy Land Experience, where you could have gone to the Scriptorium back when it was open, but it's just not open anymore. I don't know I mean, I'm sure their intentions were good, but what a bad idea, or at least a bad location for a theme park like that. And then here's Universal Studios. So here's where Volcano Bay is now, and that was just a big dirt spot before this thing was here, but Volcano Bay was not. And then here's their big volcano that you can see from the interstate when you're driving through. Where is that thing? Where are you, volcano? Of course, it's hard to see when you're looking down on the top of it. Oh, here it is right here. This would be where the volcano is. And it's the top of a water slide, but look at all the rides they got in there. That's a pretty cool park. It's probably the biggest one around, too. So if you just had to go to a water park, that's probably the one that I would hit. So when you pull into Universal, you got to pull into this thing and walk for freaking ever. And they got like a people mover thing that runs down through here. And here's where the City Walk is. And this part here is free to get into. And they got a little bars and the restaurants and stuff down there. And here's the Hard Rock Hotel. So this is Universal Studios proper. So these were all the rides are out here that are kind of movie-based rides. No roller coasters that I can recall out there. And here's where they launch all the fireworks from every night. And if you like fireworks, you'll love this area because they have tons of them. And then here's where Islands of Adventure is. Although, you know what? This is called... what is that one called? That's a pretty intense ride there. That might be the Rock and Roller Coaster ride, which just blasts music in your ears while you're riding through it, which I actually thought was pretty cool last time I rode that. But here's where most of the big rides are, and they got roller coasters all over the place out here. So if you're into that, that's where you want to go. That's Islands of Adventure. But again, you better get that fast pass if you plan on riding more than one or two things. There's that big high school that was out there. And then here's where International Drive is. It runs all the way down this area out here. So if you didn't want to spend a lot of money at the parks again for food, there's plenty of, the usual chain restaurants and stuff out here. And then there's where that huge wheel is. You can kind of see the shadow of it right there. They got a little aquarium over here. And if you just need a break from the crowds, I'd head out here because no one has ever been there whenever I've gone out there. Here's the big convention centers. And then here's where they're building Epic Universe out here. And there's the Lockheed plant. And then here's SeaWorld out here. So they can, let's see how close we can get. You can see some of these roller coasters. They got one where you like lay down. I think this one's called the Manta. So you sit in it when you first get in, and then it lays you down on your stomach as you ride that. Totally awesome. This one out here gave me a splitting migraine last time I went on it. I can't remember what that thing was called. I probably just completely blocked it from my mind because it was so traumatic for me. And they got another one over here. They got a lot of really cool rides there. I would definitely check out SeaWorld. And there's the big Shamu place where they got that going. And of course they got the little sea lion area and all that. And then here's Aquatica. Ooh, they got 2 wave pools out here. But you can tell that doesn't compare to Volcano Bay. So if you had to go to a water park, skip that one. Go to Volcano Bay. And then we got set up for our trip over to Disney. And here's downtown Disney over here. And if you're wanting to hit a really, really cool restaurant, if you want to take the kids to a place that's pretty neat, they got a Rainforest Cafe here, which I have seen in other parts of the country, so you could go to that in other cities. But then they got a place called the T-Rex Cafe, which is in this area here, which is really cool. They got a bunch of big animatronic dinosaurs and stuff in there that'll scream and roar and stomp around. And it's like you're sitting inside of a cave when you eat there. It's pretty cool. The food's good too. A little bit pricey, but nothing compared to what you pay for in the parks. And there's that balloon thing. You can actually see it's up in the air. So you can go out there and hop in it, go up in the air, look at everything, and then come back down. There's the Cirque du Soleil, and I think when Pleasure Island was here, it used to be out in this vicinity. And now they've just got some bars and restaurants that go down along a little walkway here. So that's a pretty neat place to go if you just want a night to chill a little bit. The crowds are usually not nearly as bad here as they are at the parks. And then here is, yeah, that was their wave pool. So here's Typhoon Lagoon out here, which is the older of the water parks and the second most busy in the world after that one in China. And then here's the old Key West Resort, and then here is where we used to stay all the time, which is now called Port Orleans, but this was Dixie Landing back in the day, and there's that little channel that would go all the way down downtown Disney. So we'd party at Pleasure Island, take the boat back, stumble back to our hotel room. Good times. And here's Fort Wilderness, which looked, I mean, you couldn't see any of that in the sim. It was totally covered by trees. But that's where all the little campsites and everything are. You can pull your RV in there, which if you have a big RV, that might be the way to visit Disney, but they charge quite a bit, even for the RV spots. And then here's Discovery Island, and I couldn't see any of the abandoned stuff out there. Oh, look, you can see a little bit right there. Some of the old buildings they got out there. There's another one right there. So I don't know if they'll let you actually go onto it, but you got to check out a picture of that place on the ground. It's pretty cool. And then here's the Wilderness Lodge, which I don't know if that was built up in the sim, because it kind of looked, you'd think you'd see something that big out there, and I didn't see it, but there was an open spot here, and that's where that is, if you want to do the kind of wilderness experience. And then here's the monorail tracks coming up through here. So this one, you got to walk to the monorail station from the parking lot, but they'll have trams that'll pick you up from out here, wherever you wind up parking, and we usually wind up parking somewhere out here. But the tram will come pick you up right here, take you to the monorail station, or if you want, you can ride the little boat. So these are the boat parks. And here's some of the boats right here, and it'll drop you off right here, but it takes a long time to get across this little river here. And this, by the way, is the only natural lake in the whole Disney complex. Even this isn't. This is called the Seven Seas Lagoon. I can't remember what this one's called. But this one was actually here when they built it, but they did have to dredge it all out and clean out all the roots and everything. But that was the only natural lake out here. And you can see the monorail track running all the way down there. So this will connect up with Epcot, and this is where we'd pull our pants down and smash our butt cheeks against the window and wave to all the poor little kids coming to Disney World back in the day. And then there's where that track was that they wound up pulling out, but they did leave the Mickey Mouse retention pond, so that's cool. Here's the Polynesian Resort, one of the first resorts they put out here, which still exists today. And then you can see the monorail track runs right through the middle of the Contemporary Resort. And every time you drive through there, you can see everybody getting their breakfast and all that stuff down there. So that's pretty cool. But that place is very expensive because it's the closest to the park. And then here's the Magic Kingdom. So when they drop you off, you come in here, you try to fight the crowds, run as fast as you possibly can, whether you're coming from the boat or the monorail. Here's the monorail station. So you run down this thing, try to start squeezing your way through the gates. And of course, after 9/11, they go through all your bags and all that stuff. And look at these crowds, Main Street, USA. That's where everybody comes into. And there's a barber shop right here, and there's always somebody in there getting their haircut. It's like, why in the world would you come to Disney and then pull over there and get a haircut for 30 minutes? Who knows how much they charge you for something like that? But every time I've been by there, there's someone in there getting their haircut at the barber shop. And when you're leaving Disney, there's a little ice cream shop right here. You got to stop and get some ice cream there. They got waffle cones and stuff. It's just great. So here is, I think this is called Tomorrowland, and there's Space Mountain up there, and they got a big like maglev people mover that runs all through here, comes around this thing here, and they got a couple nauseating movie type rides in these things here. Let's see if we can see the line for Space Mountain. So once you get in Space Mountain, it'll wind through about 500 different twists and turns once you get in here until you actually get into Space Mountain, and nowadays the line is backed up like all the way out here, and you're just standing out here in the heat waiting to get in there. And this is the Grand Prix ride, which is also one of the originals that they had out here. And they've built that up and shrank it back down a couple times. But that is an original. Extremely boring. But if you want to let your kid pretend like they're driving a car, it kind of runs on like one of those little steel rails, so you can't drive off of it. But that's an original. This merry-go-round is an original. And there's the castle right there. And here's one of the newer rides. This is the Seven Dwarfs Mine Ride, and this area out here is all for the little kids. And there's actually this one here is called the Barnstormer, which I always thought was kind of fun. It's a little roller coaster. And here's one of the 2 train stations you can get on. So the train tracks run all the way around the park out there, circle all the way around. You can see them coming around this way. And then here is, let's see, where is the Haunted Mansion from here? That's the Haunted Mansion right there. And then here's Small World. Oh, the bane of my existence. I don't know why anyone ever wants to go on that thing. It is literally the worst ride I've ever been on in my life. But everybody seems to want to go on it for some reason. And the best restaurant in the whole park is Pecos Bill's, which is right here. And they serve Mexican stuff in here, like taco salads and tacos and all that. So it's quite a bit cheaper. There's a barbecue place right down in here if you want to hit that one. But I always like to, because by the time you've hit all this stuff and get all the way out, it's about lunchtime, so you can hit Pecos Bill's right here. And here's where Splash Mountain used to be. And that's what it looked like when they still had it, but they are reworking that into the Moana ride. Here is the, let's see, Big Thunder Mountain out here, which is just okay. That's a pretty old one too. Wasn't one of the originals though. And then out here, this is just stuff for the staff. You can't get out that way. And then this thing right here, although you can't really see it because it just looks like the top of a tree, this is the Swiss Family Robinson Treehouse, which is also an original ride. And it's not really a ride, you just kind of walk through it, but I always kind of enjoy doing that thing. And then lastly, the Jungle Cruise, which runs through here, is also the other original ride out here, along with the Hall of Presidents, which you can't see because it's indoors. But they got a bunch of animatronic things that look kind of like all the presidents, which I've always found a bit creepy, so I don't go on that. So that's the Magic Kingdom. And then when you leave, you get back on here, hop on the monorail, take you by the Grand Floridian, which is where that poor kid was attacked by the alligator out here. Runs through there. They'll do a stop there if you want. They'll cruise by the Polynesian Resort and then drop you right back off where you got on the monorail over here. So heading down to Epcot. When you get to Epcot, they have trams for this too. And of course, we usually wind up parking somewhere out here because we don't get there early enough. There's the big ball where Spaceship Earth is. And they have like an aquarium ride here, which is just okay. And this thing back in the day, and I haven't been to Epcot in probably 15 years, but this one was kind of like a future farming world where they had a bunch of hydroponic plants and stuff growing with all the roots hanging out. They got a big restaurant you can eat at in there. And then down here is the, it's like a racetrack ride, which is actually pretty cool. As far as thrilling, that's probably the most thrilling they have in here. But they've turned this one into a Guardians of the Galaxy ride recently, which I have not yet been on. So that may be pretty cool too. And you come down here, and this is where the World Showcase is. So each of these little stations here, each of these buildings is supposed to be representative of another part of the world. And the only one I ever went on was the Norway one, which was right in here. But they've turned that into the, what was the name of that movie? Oh, Frozen, that's what it was. It's like an Ilsa ride now, and I don't think there's even a ride in there anymore. I could be wrong about that. And then over here is the MGM Park, which is, again, just okay, with the Tower of Terror and stuff like that there. And then Blizzard Beach is... Where is that? Oh, here's Hollywood Studios here. Sorry, this is a resort over here. Blizzard Hollywood Studios is here. Where is Blizzard Beach? Oh, it's out here. Okay, we'll look at that in just a second. So the Tower of Terror ride, and this is just... The first time I went here, it was still MGM, and they had a pretty cool earthquake ride where you would ride back here. It was called Catastrophe Canyon or something like that. And the train would stop and everything would start shaking and fire would blow out and all that. That was pretty cool, but they've torn that up. And the only thing cool, I think, out there now is the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. Other than that, I'd probably skip that place. And then here's Blizzard Beach, the only of the water parks I've been to, and that one is very cool. Really enjoyed going to that place. My kids had a blast too. And then out here is where Animal Kingdom is. So you'll really catch Animal Kingdom. We'll fly right over it on the first pass, and then when you come around Epcot is where I drew the path to be able to spot the best look at Animal Kingdom, but I think it was pretty tree covered. We couldn't see all that much. And out here is where that big safari thing goes. Look how big this area is. And you can even see the little buses that they put the people in, and there's like 50 people stuffed in that thing. And they got elephants and giraffes and rhinos, and it goes all the way. It's a pretty long ride, so you really feel like you're getting your weight's worth when you get on that thing, and you will wait forever to get on that. Like a long, long time, but it's pretty cool. And then let's see if they have the Avatar thing yet. This might be it here. No, here it is here. So when you get on the Avatar ride, you walk through this big, long world that kind of looks like Pandora, you know, the world in Avatar, and it is really cool. I mean, the wait is half the fun on that thing because they take you through all kinds of just really cool-looking stuff. And then that ride, absolutely got to check that out. And then, of course, the Yeti ride, or the Everest ride, Expedition Everest, and I can't recall exactly where that was, but make sure you hit at least that and the Pandora thing. So if you're coming to Animal Kingdom, the only 3 things you'll have time for, make sure you hit Expedition Everest, the Avatar thing, and then hit this thing out here. They have like a little rapids ride too, which is, oh, there's Expedition. Yeah, Everest is a big, it looks like Mount Everest. That's it right there. And it goes inside there and then flips around backwards, and you go through part of it backwards. Very cool. So here's the Animal Kingdom Lodge, And then the cheaper stuff, if you want to stay at a place that's not ridiculously expensive, is a little bit further. It's over this way. Here's the All-Star Resort. So if you're looking for the best budget place to go to and you want to stay at Disney, that's pretty cheap unless you're going to throw a tent out at the Wilderness Lodge. And here's the ESPN Wild World of Sports. We checked that out when we were coming in for our approach. And then here is Kissimmee Gateway with its flat trees out here. But at least, what is that? A little go-kart park? What is that? What the heck is that thing? That seems like an odd spot for a go-kart place, but that looks like that's what it is. And if any of you have flown over to whatever that anomaly was sticking up in the air that looked like a huge megaphone, let me know what kind of glitch that is. That looked pretty interesting. I'd never noticed that before. And that's it, guys. That's our Orlando tour. We've seen everything there is to see in Orlando, and as good as it's going to look if you throw all the add-ons in there. So again, the add-ons, the big ones will be for downtown Orlando and Kissimmee, which we didn't fly really over that much. But here's that water park that they did add. Oh, look, it's not there now. But they added that. That must have been part of the Kissimmee pack because they've only built that since like 2000. I think it opened in 2001, so it's strange that that was in there, but it was in there. And that's it. Total blast, guys. Can't wait to see you again in the skies. Oh, real quick, our next flight I think is probably going to be a short hop. I want to check out something that's pretty cool looking. I won't tell you what that is. And then I think we're going to head down to Sao Paulo. I had a few requests for that one, so we'll check that out next. All right, guys. Talk to you again soon. Later.